Tarrant County Republican Party Chair Rick Barnes, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, the third special session starts, and redistricting is one of the biggest agenda items, if not the biggest item. How big of a legal fight are you expecting? A lot of people say this is definitely going to court.
Well, I think these things always go to court as part of the process and as part of the expectation. Unfortunately, I think it'll be a waste of a lot of time and a lot of taxpayer money. The Republicans across the state spoke loudly in the last election to make sure that they were in charge of the redistricting process, and so now the Democrats are just simply in a position of response. And so I think part of their response, in fact, will be in fact taking it to court, and we'll just see how long that process takes.
So you're basically saying elections have consequences.
I think elections always have consequences, pro or con, and I think that's the reality of this one. We fought really hard in that last election, and part of our clear message was we need to win the House to make sure that we are in charge of the redistricting process, and that happened across the state.
So let's talk about the proposed Senate map, which came out over the weekend. And State Senate District 10, which has been in Tarrant County, now is proposed to be in still a little bit of Tarrant County, but Johnson and Parker counties as well. And Senator Beverly Powell, the Democrat who represents the district, has rejected that, basically saying it's intentionally discriminatory. What's your reaction?
Well, the reality with redistricting is a numbers game, and you got to make, the whole purpose of doing it is to make sure that we have equal representation within all the Senate seats. I have not talked to anybody that's on the districting committee to ask the specifics on how or why that seat got realigned the way it did. But I really think, as much as anything else, it's a numbers game, and anybody, the voters will determine who's the best person to serve them in any of these districts across the entire state. We'll see how that moves forward. The reality is that we now in Tarrant County have 5 different Senate seats touching our county, which is a very big positive statement for us. It means that we're a player in Austin, and we're going to be a player in conversations moving forward, at least on the Senate side. And so we're pretty happy with that redistricting process, including Senate District 10.
And how confident are you that it will withstand a legal challenge? Because one of the things that Senator Powell said is that this district right now is a perfect crossover district. It has been a purple district for years, as you know. And so why are you confident that this will withstand legal scrutiny?
Well, I do think out of all the 5 that we are talking about in Tarrant County, it's probably the one that's going to receive the most scrutiny, and particularly because we have a senator in that seat that's going to challenge it from the other side. If you look at the southern part of Tarrant County, it is the part of our county where we even acknowledge that we have lots of work to do. I'm not as involved in what's going on in Johnson or Parker County. I know Parker County is a strong Republican county as well. But again, I do think that if there's any out of the 5 that we have, it is probably the one that will receive the most scrutiny, and we'll just see how it moves forward as we get through the process.
Another map that everybody is going to be anticipating very much, besides the state house, is the congressional map. And as you know, Texas is going to be gaining 2 congressional seats. Do you expect one of those to be in North Texas?
Most definitely. And again, back to the numbers game, you really can't help but put one in North Texas. We have received growth in this part of the state, in Dallas-Fort Worth alone, that warrants a new congressional seat. And so the numbers game almost sets it up automatically, and then we'll just have to watch and see where it actually falls.
And what's your thought? What should be the strong basis? Because one thing that we've read and heard from the census is that much of the growth in Texas came from people of color. On the other hand, when you look at where the growth took place, it's in the northern suburbs, which have become more diverse. So I'm wondering, do you think that but the northern suburbs are still Republican. And so I'm wondering, do you think that this should be decided on the demographics of the population growth or where the population growth is taking place?
The Senate is, redistricting process is a process of numbers, not a process of color. And not a process of demographic. And I think the mindset that says we set it up to serve a specific demographic is the wrong mindset. That's not at all what it's intended to do. It's intended to provide for equal representation amongst people. And regardless of the demographic of those people, that's not the intention. And I do think the northern suburbs of Dallas-Fort Worth is where we have a ton of growth, particularly the northern suburbs of Tarrant County. Frankly, more, I think that's where we're going to see some congressional change. And so, it's not going to be an issue of looking at how they vote or how they stand on issues. It's going to be an issue of representation. And I think that's the way the way the census process is supposed to feed into the redistricting process.
But at least on the last map, I mean, there are some very strange looking districts as far as the shapes are concerned. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, there always is, and that's just kind of part of the reality, but it's a part of actually, again, grabbing the numbers wherever the numbers exist. When we see a ton of growth out north, but we see little growth inside Fort Worth, the numbers are going to fall outside the loop, and that's where we're going to see those changes take place. When you look at the numbers over and under prior to the actual maps coming out, the numbers where we see people that are under the expected number, particularly for the House seats, is actually inside the loop of 820. And so we're going to see some growth outside the loop. And it means, if it means a map that looks kind of odd, they always look odd. We have these maps in our office and we look at them all the time and question what were they thinking 10 years ago. And I think those questions will continue as we move beyond this process.
And so let me ask you also about polls. Another poll came out this weekend, the Dallas Morning News UT Tyler poll. It's the second poll that shows Governor Abbott's approval numbers in the 40s, far lower than what it has been. To what do you attribute that, and how big of a concern is that?
Well, I think I attribute those numbers just the reality of what's going on in the state. We have a lack of federal support for what's going on along our border, and the expectation is that the governor fixes that, and he's extremely strapped on how much he can do and how fast. And so that's one of his challenges. The response to COVID was a challenge for anybody that had to make responses to COVID. And I think those numbers reflect some of that. I think as we get closer to this election, as we move forward to the primary, whenever the primary takes place, and then the general election in November, we'll see strong support for the Republican governor stepping forward, and those numbers will improve as we get closer to the election.
And then my last question to you is about this report in Axios over the weekend that says Beto O'Rourke is preparing a run for governor. Your reaction to that?
He has been the absolute only candidate that anybody has talked about on the Democrat side, which ought to be a statement about the reality of what's going on the Democrat side of the conversation. Whenever you have a single candidate who's lost 2 major elections in a row, and he's the best that they can come up to run for governor in the next cycle, it says a lot about where they are as a party. We're prepared to run against anybody, but particularly against him. We know enough on him after running in 2 losing elections that doesn't concern us, frankly, at all.
Do you think it helps Republicans?
I think so in some ways. I call him Robert Francis O'Rourke, not Beto. He can't change his name for us and make us change it along with him. The reality is he's a good campaigner. He's a good rallier of his people on his side of the aisle. But at the same time, he loses elections, and so I think it'll wake our people up to say this guy's out there again. We'll see how it affects his side because they know that they can't get him elected.
All right. Tarrant County Republican Party Chair Rick Barnes, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it this morning.